A big Hello and welcome to NDTV Profit. It's 4 p.m. and you're watching The Reporter and I am Pragati Oberoi. The big story of the hour is the security breach at the Parliament, of course, but we're also tracking the other top stories for you. Here are the headlines. A big security breach in the Parliament as two men jump over tables in Lok Sabha carrying gas canisters which gave off yellow smoke. MPs run out, and this breach also comes on the 22nd anniversary of the attack on the Parliament. Speaker Om Birla promises a thorough probe. The Nifty and the Sensex stage a last-hour recovery in trade despite IT stocks dragging the indices down during the day. Mid-caps and small caps helped the benchmark stage a cracker of a recovery. We have the first ever foundation to be up on the NSE Social Stock Exchange. SGBS Unnati Management speaks to NDTV Profit. We tell you what the inflation numbers mean to your household budget. Don't miss our Thali economic segment. Members of Parliament ran out of the Lok Sabha after a big security breach took place, as we have already spoken about it and covered it throughout the day. Now, MPs who spoke to reporters outside the Parliament said that they saw two men barging into the Parliament with gas canisters in their hands. They also said that the canisters were giving off yellow smoke. Now, this grave security breach took place on the 22nd anniversary of the Parliament attack. Following this security breach, the Lok Sabha was also adjourned. And of course, this was the big newsmaker of the day. That's the Lok Sabha footage playing right on your screen. Now, NDTV's Parliament reporter Himanshu Shekhar has been following this story in and out, and he brings us more. Here's a look at what he had to say.
Right. See, this is the worst and perhaps the most serious security breach in Parliament in the last 22 years. I'm actually standing just in front of the first crime scene when around 12:30 p.m. today, two people, one man and one woman, they came with canisters and they were raising slogans and they burst the first canister right here. As you can see, the police has made a round here. This area has been cordoned off and you can see the red chemicals here on the television screen now. Now, these are the chemicals which had burst out when the first canister was burst by these two people who had come here to protest. And police, the Delhi police crime team has actually taken control of this place where the first crime scene happened. And on my left side, you can see there's a Delhi police forensic van here, and forensic officials are now examining the nature of the chemical that was used when the first canister was burst here, when different colors of smoke actually came out. And then exactly 15 to 20 minutes later, behind me inside the new Parliament building in Lok Sabha, two people who had gone inside as visitors, they jumped one after the other inside Lok Sabha when the zero-hour proceedings were going on. And the first person, when he jumped from the visitors gallery, the MPs have told us that they thought that this is perhaps an accident. Somebody who's perhaps not very well versed with the Parliament sitting system has perhaps fallen from the visitors gallery. But when within seconds the second person jumped from the visitors gallery right where the MPs were sitting when the 0 hour was going on, then MPs suddenly realized that something untoward, exceptional is happening. And then the MPs were the first to actually jump and stop these two men. But by then they had taken out their canisters, which they had hidden in their shoes, and they burst one canister after the other, and a yellow smoke then came out. And the entire Lok Sabha chamber was full of smoke for several minutes. And by then the parliamentary security officials and the marshals were rushed in and they detained these two people. So very, very serious security breach has happened. The worst, as I said, perhaps in last 22 years after the December 13, 2001 Parliament terror attack. We now take you to Karthik Chidambaram, who is a Lok Sabha MP from Tamil Nadu, and this is what he had to say to NDTV about what exactly happened inside Lok Sabha. लोक सभा में एक बड़ा सिक्योरिटी ब्रीच हुआ है. मेरे साथ कार्तिक चिदम्बरम हैं. What did you see in the house? What happened?
The 0 hour was happening. I was awaiting my turn to speak. Suddenly, one person jumped from the visitors gallery. Initially, it appeared as if he had just leaned over and fallen down. That is what my initial reaction was. But then he was followed by another person also jumping. Then I realized that it was a deliberate act. And one person started running towards the speaker's chair, and he took out his shoe. He was overpowered by certain members, but he had a canister in his hand which had opened. The other person jumped down and also opened a canister, and both the canisters emitted a yellow smoke. We do not know what the composition of the yellow smoke was. It could have easily been toxic. It could have been poisonous. It could have been a smoke bomb, or it could have been a tear gas. It could have been anything. So this is a serious breach of security, and especially it's happening on the 13th of December, the anniversary of the Parliament attack. We should not forget that. And it's surprising that the two people were able to bring canisters into the visitors gallery of the Parliament, because the Parliament, to come into the Parliament gallery, you need the signature of a particular MP, and you also need their ID. So it's not as if unknown people can come there. In spite of this, and there is a strict screening before people come there, they're not even allowed to bring their mobile phones. It's very surprising how they have brought in two canisters. This is a serious security breach, and the Speaker, who is the custodian of the House, must constitute an immediate inquiry, apprehend all those people who were involved in it, and see where the breaches were.
So what has happened now to these? Have they been arrested?
They were obviously overpowered and taken. They were obviously overpowered and taken into custody, but I do not know what happens. You must ask the Speaker, because he's the custodian of the House. But the fact that two people could come into the visitors gallery and carry canisters which can emit smoke, this smoke could have been anything. These fumes could have been poisonous. I'm not saying they are poisonous. They could have had the potential of being poisonous. If they had been poisonous, the fallout would have been terrible. The House was with many members. This would have had especially happening on the 13th of December, is sending out a very bad signal, and it is also sending a signal that our security is not tight.
So you want a high-level investigation?
Of course, we want a high-level inquiry, and it must be tabled in the House, and the Speaker must constitute it.
Well, that was our colleague live from Lok Sabha, and with bits and pieces here and there, we'll keep bringing you more updates on what happened at Lok Sabha during the day. Now, let's take a look at the markets. Let's have a Nifty chart up on our screen, because what a recovery it staged late in the day. Thanks to the mid caps and the small caps, the Nifty recovered from the day's low to close just short of 21,000. Let's also have a look at the Sensex. The Sensex too came off lows to close the day at 69,584. But if one were to look at the heroes of the day or during the trade, they were mid caps and the small caps that managed to bring the benchmark indices back in the green. The Nifty Small Cap 100 index hit a record high as well. If one were to look at the top gainers and the losers, tech stocks and banks definitely dragged the markets down for most of the day, but the Nifty Bank though closed flat. Moving on, let's dive deep into the top headlines as well. While the sales volumes of ITC cigarettes have posted a robust recovery as it reached near its peak level, and that's also a level that was last seen in the financial year 2013, all this is all due to and thanks to the rational taxation, rollout of new variants, and a dip in the illicit trade. My colleague Sesa Sen is joining us with right now, giving us more details on this. Sesa, what a recovery it has been. Please help us understand what is this exactly about.
Right. So cigarette volumes, had declined 20% between FY13 and FY20, rightly because, as you mentioned, due to sharp rise in taxes, which led to illicit trade to flourish. Now, however, the company managed to claw back sales from illicit trade from FY22 onwards, as the taxes remained relatively stable and due to several portfolio interventions as well. For example, ITC has a leading local brand in every geography. It has also launched several variants of its flagship brands, Gold Flake and Classic. Now, the new launches have increased 5 times over the last 5 years now, accounting for 17% of the overall volumes. Now, here is a catch. That is, even though ITC is transforming itself to become an FMCG company, it is highly dependent on cigarettes business. Now, going forward, there is enough headroom for growth, as the per capita consumption of cigarettes in India is one of the lowest in the world, with legal cigarettes accounting for less than 9%. So we did speak to Sanjeev Puri did address the analysts, on the Investors Day, and he said that the focus remains on maximizing cigarette potential within the tobacco basket, reinforcing market standing, and towards portfolio intervention in differentiated formats to counter illicit trade and retain its #1 crown in the industry.
Right,
Over to you.
Sessa. While we're at it, let's have a look at the FMCG industry as well, because from what we are understanding, it is also reeling from a prolonged consumption slowdown. And now, with no comfort at sight, at least for this financial year, it's important to understand what exactly is the industry's shape going ahead. Sessa, will this trend continue in the coming future?
Yes, at least in the near future, there are no immediate triggers. That is what we get to hear from the management of several FMCG companies. They expect demand to recover only in the first quarter of fiscal 2025. Now, what will lead to this demand to recover? So they expect the gradual uptick in rural sales, which has been laggard for several quarters now, to be kind of recovering in a gradual manner, and also the pricing corrections as they flow through to reach the end consumers will kind of, help companies regain volumes. What we have seen is it's not that the high prices of staples, home care products, or be it packaged goods, that has led to the pressure on volume growth. Consumption has also been hit by competing categories such as leisure, entertainment, travel, eating out, expenditure on consumer durables, which has kind of taken away the share of wallets at the middle and the upper ends of the market. Now, analysts believe that in the next decade, the industry volume might reach the 5 to 6% level. However, that would be driven by the supply side measures. Companies, they need to innovate, is what we get to hear from the analysts. Also, as companies were chasing profitability in an inflationary setting, they didn't really do enough in terms of ad spends, promotions, and innovation. So that is the reason that actually resulted in the structural slowdown. We caught up with Abhik Singh, who is the managing director and senior partner at Boston Consulting Group, and he says that to reignite growth in the FMCG sector, the companies will now have to emphasize on the share of wallet rather than on competition, focus on category and segments through innovation, and shift focus from penetration to usage and frequency in order to revive growth.
Right, Sessa. Thanks so much for those details. We'll keep a close watch on this segment. But it's time for a short break. Don't go anywhere. On the other side of the break, we have a very special segment called Ghar Kharcha waiting for you. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching The Reporter with us. Moving on, let's shift our gaze to Ghar Ka Kharcha. Now, after onions, the rise of garlic prices continue to add pressure on the Indian household budget, especially with the rates doubling in last about 6 weeks. We have our colleague Pallavi Nahata with us more on this. Pallavi, onions and now garlic, what's been up with the household budget?
Hi Pragati. So household budgets are likely to have seen a little bit of a bump up in November because of households having to shell out more on staples such as onions, dals. Non-food components continue to provide comfort. That's the reading we've got from yesterday's inflation data. Retail inflation had come in at about 5.5% for November. That was compared to a print of 4.87% in October. Now, this rise was largely led by vegetables and other food items. So, food and beverage inflation had come in at 8.02% compared with 6.24% the previous month. Now, onions, like you mentioned, a key staple in Indian kitchens, once again brought tears to consumers. Prices were up by nearly 90% from a year ago. On a sequential basis, they were up by nearly 11%. Likewise, pulses inflation continued to remain elevated at 20.2%. Spices inflation continued to rise once again, coming in at 21.6%. Also, high-frequency food prices for the first 2 weeks of December do show a little bit of moderation, but it's much lesser than what we usually tend to see around this time of the year. Utilities, meanwhile, have shown mixed trends. Electricity bills remain elevated. Consumers are having to shell out nearly about 10% more on an aggregate on electricity bills from an year ago. That's according to the ministry. Likewise, gold inflation has risen. That's come in at 17.6%. What does continue to provide comfort is lower inflation on clothing, footwear, housing, etc.
Right, Pallavi, thanks so much for those details. That was a bit on Thalinomics. Moving on to the stationery space. Now, DOMS Industries IPO opened for subscription this morning, with the company planning to raise about 1,200 crore rupees. Our colleague Saloni Kothari is here with more details. Saloni, the IPO opened. What is up with the company right now?
Right. So, DOMS IPO opened today and it's open till 15th of December, and it was fully subscribed within the first hour of the opening. So, as of 4 p.m., the issue has been subscribed over 4 times, led totally by retail investors again, as we've seen in the previous IPO, openings as well. So, retail subscription is over 15x as of now, and NIIs, that is non-institutional investors, have booked over 5x. The price band was between 750 and 790, and the company aims to raise, as you mentioned, rupees 1,200 crore, which is a mix of fresh issue as well as offer for sale. The PE ratio, that's the price to earning ratio, that is that you need to know to understand if the valuation makes sense. So that is slightly at a higher end, which is 43 times compared to your industry average. However, given the company's dominant set in the pencil making space, and also the profitability that it has and the revenue that it has, so analysts have been kind of betting on that, and they've actually given a thumbs up to the IPO, especially giving it a subscribe rating for the long term. Our colleague Sajid Mangat also spoke to the management, and they actually elaborated on their plans to how they plan to use the proceeds of the issue to set up a manufacturing plant. So listen into what they have to say.
We were able to acquire 44 acre of land in Umargaon, where our existing factories are based, and we would want to spend the IPO proceeds of 280 crore for the expansion of our new facilities upcoming on 44 acre of land, and 70 crore will be as a GCP from the proceeds.
Rahul, by when do you see this entire capex to be completed, and when do you see revenue flow coming through once this capex is completed?
So, sir, as things are planned right now, we received initial approvals from the regulatory authorities We expect to start construction in this on this project from January 2024. This project would be completed by March 26, and FY 26-27 would be the year when we'll start seeing revenues coming from this project.
Well, those were our colleagues speaking to the management as well. It's time for a short break. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching The Reporter with me, Pragati Oberoi. Now, as part of the Samarth by Hyundai initiative in partnership with NDTV, we take a look into the journey of 23-year-old Pranav Bakshi, who's India's first model with autism. He also highlights the complexities, limitations and difficulties associated with this problem.
Autism is not a disease, it's a condition. Autism is my superpower. I don't suffer from autism.
23-year-old Pranav Bakshi is working with Thomson Reuters and loves anything to do with lights, camera and action. He became India's first model with autism after he walked the ramp for Lakme Fashion Week.
I like to pose in front of the camera and I do poses and expressions in front of the mirror. And I like to walk the ramp because it makes me feel good and I don't get nervous at all.
But being in crowded spaces has not been easy for Pranav.
I don't like crowds in concerts, malls, railway stations and airports. And I handle the situation to ignore the crowd.
Pranav dreams of shifting to Mumbai, and his mother Anupama has found her own process of learning and unlearning what works for Pranav.
I only followed Pranav, so I just tried to understand his challenges. Very happy, bright kid all over the place. He's kind, he's an empath. I see all kinds of things, long journey. But of course, there is autism behind all this, and his autism manifests in his obsessions and his anxieties, of course. So we have coping mechanisms in place. He had such poor coordination issues back then. Look at him doing deadlifts. Fitness is religion for him.
When you talk about autism, the brains of autistic people are wired differently from the non-autistic people, right? So as a result, they perceive the environment differently. So what happens as a result is the way they communicate or understand communication is different from the non-autistic.
According to a report by ET Health World, about 18 million people in India are diagnosed with autism. It is important to understand that autism is a spectrum disorder.
When you talk about the spectrum, the bottom line is just like in the general population, there are people with variations in intelligence. There is the same kind of variation in intelligence amongst autistic people. So the way we try and look at it is how independently can a person is able to function. So we look at that. Somebody who is very independent, and you have people at the other end who would require a lot of support with all their day-to-day activities and everything in between. So people are across that entire spectrum.
What can be an inclusive environment for individuals, keeping in mind different kinds of disabilities?
Making environments inclusive for autistic people is trying to understand their experiences. So there are simple things like sometimes giving them a little time to process information because they're dealing with a lot of sensory overload all the time. You have to give them that time.
It is critical to create inclusive spaces, as inclusive public spaces are fundamental to participation and inclusion in society.
Well, that's all that we have for now for you on this show. Do stay tuned to NDTV Profit for all the latest news and updates.